Hello and welcome. This is going to be the first in a series of trainings in Photoshop. Right now you're seeing the interface for Photoshop CS6. Photoshop CC looks very similar to this. 3, 4, 5, and 6, that's basically all the versions I'm going to address. They look similar to this, only they have a white background instead of this charcoal color. Some people like the charcoal, some people like it black. You can change it if you wish to. We're going to start off learning in CS6, but most of all these things will apply in the other versions as well. We're not going to get into uncharted territory for the most part on other software packages. But let me say, if we go to Window and Workspace, you'll see right here that we have different looks that we can give this. If we are working in 3D, we get a different kind of palette layout. If we're going to work in painting, we have the paint brushes and so forth. But all of these things will work very similarly. I mean, there's nothing, if I have painting open, there's nothing I can't do to a photograph, if that's something you're thinking. We can work on anything we want in any one of these desktop looks. I just prefer to work in photography, and once you see an image open, this up here is going to change. And let's just go ahead and do that so we have something to work with. So I'm going to go up to File, down to Open. You can also use the shortcut key, Control 0. If you're on a Macintosh, that would be Command 0. And you can travel to anywhere on your computer you want to and find the images that you want to work with. There's also another way, and we're going to look at it in just a minute, called Adobe Bridge. Here's the image I want. So I'm going to open that up. Just double click on it or click once and hit open. Now mine quickly jumped into another program. That's okay. This is normally what it's going to go into. Alright, so we see this photograph of a little sporty looking car and a gentleman driving it. And right off the bat, we've got all of these colors up here. And these are representative of the colors that are in the image. So you see we've got a lot of reds, and you can see hints of red all through there. But anyway, this is the representative of that. So let me enlarge this picture and show you something that's right here beside it. There's a navigator tab right here. This lets us click and drag anywhere we want this. We can also make this image smaller or larger with this, what's called a scrubby slider. Okay, so you've got this to navigate with. It's a great tool. It comes right up on top whenever we use the Workspace photography. It's right there next to the histogram. If you're not really interested in the histogram, you can click and drag and move it over to this side. So then it's going to default to the navigator always being the first thing that you see when you open your images, which is handy. It's up to you how you set that up. Now, right down here, you'll notice this is called the Layers palette. And right now it says Layers, and we've got this layer. This image is on this layer. And then we've got Channels. The channels, these are the representative channels of what this image is made up of. Here are all the reds, the greens, and the blues. So if we turn that off, there you see the different blacks and whites. They're more or less intense depending on the color. And you can see how they'll look if we just turn one off and so forth. But we'll get into channels later on. Paths, we'll get into paths later on too. I don't use paths a lot, so what I do is click and drag and get that out there like that, and then hit that X. Now we can easily get to any of these tools by going to Window and we can go right down here alphabetically to paths. So if I want it back anytime, I can quickly get it. Any of these settings or panels over here I can get to from the window. Alright, one I really do like to have up here that's not is the history palette. So if I click on that, it opens up the history. I'm going to click right on the word history, drag it down, close that, and move this tab right over here and drop it, and it's showing me that it'll go right in there. So now everything I do in Photoshop is recorded for me. So let's just say I'm erasing, it just showed the erase. If I paint, there's painting. So I actually used the brush tool. So all of these things, there I cropped. So if we want to go back to any step in the process, that's all we have to do. And we can make that full size again. I'm just going to hold down my control key and press the letter 0, and it fills the screen again with our little sports car. So we'll get into these things more later on. I just wanted to show you that those things are there and they're very handy. And this is the way I work on everything. Even if I'm in painting, if I decide I want to paint some work, I still have these three things there at all times. Alright, let's go back and bring up the photography again. Over here at the very top of our toolbar, we have the Move tool. I'm just going to make a selection out of something, and we'll talk about selections more soon. I'm just going to make a layer of that thing that I just made a selection around. Now, the reason I did that was to show you what this Move tool will do. When we click that, or you can press the letter V as in victory, and we can click and drag and move anything around inside the image as long as it's on its own layer. We can move it anytime we want to. If we decide to make a selection out of the front tire, and I'm just doing a Control J, or we can go up to Edit, Copy, got to be on the right layer, however, Edit, down to Copy, Edit, and Paste. And now we have, click on the Move tool, and now we have the tire. So now we have three layers, and we're going to get into the layers palette later on. I just wanted to demo to you what the Move tool would do for you. If I hold down the Control key and click on this piece, it will select that layer, and now I can move it. If I Control click or Command click on a Mac, it'll select that layer. If you watch over here as I click on these, you see what it's doing. Alright, we don't need those anymore, so I'm just going to throw those away. Next is the Marquee tool. And if you hold your mouse, if you what they call hover your mouse, and click right on that, you'll see we have four things under here. The Move tool doesn't have anything else. It's simply the Move tool. But right here, if we click and hold, you'll see we have the rectangular, elliptical marquee, single row marquee, and single column. All of these things do work a little bit differently. So you can click and drag, and you notice these black and white moving dots. Well, in Photoshop land, we call those marching ants. It's an animation to show you that an area has been selected. If we go back up here to the elliptical marquee and click and drag, you see now we have a circle to work with. Circle, I can't talk right today. And it's also got the marching ants around it. We can make circles around all the objects inside of Photoshop. if we want to work on particular things. And obviously the single row, that's a one row there. There's actually space in between there. Let me click on there. And single column is pretty obvious. It's going to go vertically. So we just have that tiny little area for single column. The next tool, there's a couple of ways that we can turn those marching ants off. Let me make something relatively large here. We can click somewhere and they go away if it's outside the area that's clicked. If we click inside, it also goes away in this case. But out here, we can make it go away. We can also go to select, deselect, and it turns it off. We can also use a keyboard shortcut, Control D, D as in dog, and it turns it off. Another thing that we can do with the marching ants is Control H. H actually just hides them. If we hit Control H again, it reappears. So lots of power inside of these tools. Right here is the lasso tool, and then you see that we also have polygonal lasso tool and a magnetic lasso tool. The lasso tool is like a free hand selection tool. You can just draw, and you see it's not accurate, but it is a way to do a really fast selection. The polygonal, as some people call it, the polygonal, basically gives you straight line selection. So if you click here and go down here and click, and here and here and here, and go back to where we started, you get that little symbol. And so you can get all kinds of straight line selection areas. All right. Then you have the magnetic lasso, which looks at the edges of things, and sometimes it's helpful and sometimes it's not. The best way to use this particular selection tool is something that's high contrast. Where there are similarities in colors, it is problematic. If we do the Control D, D as in dog, or Command D on a Mac, that goes away. Alright, the next one we have is the quick selection tool. Normally this is what you're going to see on top. And the quick selection tool acts like a paintbrush. That is, if we move our mouse out here into the image, you see a little dot. But if I move the right bracket key, which is located over by the letter P on the keyboard, you have a left bracket and a right bracket. The right bracket makes the brush bigger. The left bracket makes the brush smaller. So you can click and drag with this selection tool, and you see how powerful this selection tool is. It's pretty good about snapping to those areas. Get that out there. Alright, there's a little bit more, and here, and so forth. It doesn't do a perfect job usually, but it is a very nice one. I'm going to do a Control D as in dog, Command D on a Mac. Go back, and then we have a magic wand right here. And we can click with it, and it makes selections based on tolerance and all of these things up here. So if we click once, it makes a selection. If we click again, it undoes this selection and then makes a selection where we next click. If we wanted to select this whole car this way, that's going to be very inconvenient. But if we hold down the Shift key, notice it turns into a plus sign and allows us to add to the selection. So I'm going to keep clicking through here. And you see it went too far. So then what we do, we can undo things when we make a mistake or something happens that we don't like. We can undo that by going to Edit and Step Backwards. The other thing that I like to do, and a lot of users do, is Control Z. So if I add to the selection to the point where I go too far, we can do Control Z. Z is in zebra. Control or Command Z on a Mac, and that goes back one step. If you want to go back several steps backwards, you hold down Control Alt Z, and you can keep going back in your selections. If you're on a Macintosh, that's Command Option Z, multiple undos. Or we can go to our history palette, and you see we can step backwards. But you notice I can't get back to where I was a while ago because we've run out of steps that we can go back. So it's not an unlimited history. We can go back quite a ways, but we can't go back completely. Now, we can change some of these things, and we'll get into that later, how far we can go back in history by setting our preferences. But for right now, be mindful that you have a limited number of steps that you can go back. All right, the next thing we have here is the crop tool, and you see we can get to the crop tool by pressing the letter C or clicking right on the tool. The crop tool has several options. If we go up here to the top and click here, we can crop unconstrained. That means we can, resize it any way we want to. We can say we want 1:1, 4:5, and so forth. There are also presets that we can set up. We can also say size and resolution. We want it to be exactly this. So we can say I want this to be 5 by 7. So we put 7 in for the width, 5 in for the height, and we'll say the resolution is 200. Click OK. There's what it's going to look like. So we have to move the image around to get it what we want inside that box. I'm going to hit Escape to undo that because I really don't want to crop it at this point. I just wanted you to see how easy it is to crop. The next tool is several tools actually. There is the Eyedropper, 3D material, color sampler, ruler, note tool, 1, 2, 3 count tool. Lots of handy dandy tools. The number one tool that you're going to use there though is the Eyedropper. If you're in the image and you want to do something, you want to say you want to paint this car that red. If you've got the Eyedropper clicked, you can go right over there and click on that red and see that's the color that's in that circle. If I click on the car right now, you'll see the red now is on the bottom because that was the last thing we sampled. And this thing that we sampled is white or ivory or whatever color we want it to be. And if we go over to the tire sample there, you see it's a dark gray, and the one before it was the white. So great tools underneath here. The ruler tool can be really a great tool as well. And another one I like a lot too is we hold that down, note tool. If we click on that, we can click anywhere in our image and type a note. And this is especially helpful if you're trying to remember something that you've done to this image or that you plan on doing to this image. And if you're like me, you may forget or there's some steps that you want to remind yourself about. You can put that in here. It becomes a part of the image as long as you save it as a particular file size, and we'll get into that too. Also good for if you work with other people in Photoshop and they're collaborating with you on an image. You can put a note in, send them the image that you're working on, and they can open this note. So, very handy. Just do away with that. Next we have what looks like a Band-Aid, and it is a Band-Aid, basically. The top one is the spot healing tool. So if you've got a blemish in your image, and let me just blow this up a little bit. I apologize for that. Keyboard slip up. If I just click and drag over that little spot, it just heals them. It's a great tool. It has limitations, but generally speaking, it can really save you hours. If you're repairing an old photograph, for example, it can be terrific. Then you have other tools under that. Spot healing tool works very similarly, but it allows you to sample from one place and cover another. And then under it, the patch tool, you make a selection around something and click and move it, and it gets rid of it. Notice you can select from a lighter area and paste into a darker area, and it mathematically figures the light and shadow, so it makes it look like it belongs there. Really awesome tools. We have a couple of other ones, and red eye tool, if you're photographing people and your flash goes off and you get red in their eyes, this is a very powerful tool to take that out. This is the paintbrush tool, the brush. Under it we have regular brush, we have the pencil, color replacement, and mixer brush. This is for painting, and there is a painting engine in Photoshop, and we're going to get into that later on in the semester. Brush tool, whatever's on top here are the brushes, so we can just click on a brush, come into the image, and remember we sampled that tire, so if we paint now, the opacity is down, so we're painting with that color we sampled a while ago. Down here is also a color sampler. We can just click right on this to bring up the color picker. So if we want this orangey color, come back, click on that again. Let's say we want a red, we can go up here to the top, a dark red, paint. So you see it's a very powerful tool. Why not some pink? And then you say, well, I don't want to keep going back to get that red because I'll have a tough time matching that red back up. Just go back to your eyedropper, sample that red, and then click on your brush, and it's exactly the same color as that red. The brush tool, you can bring it up by just pressing the letter B, as it showed there. And if you want to use the healing tools, just press the letter J. J as in jump. Here is another powerful tool to fix things with, to clean them up. It's called the clone stamp. And if we go up here, if we want to make a copy of that door panel or that handle, we option click on a Mac and we alt click on a PC to sample that and move this down so you can already see a preview of what it's going to paint. And our opacity needs to be turned to 100% for that to work very well. So now we have two door handles to get in the car. So this is a great tool if you're trying to get rid of things also. So we can get rid of these little dots if we want to. We can paint over that. But you got to be careful you can't get too close. Get rid of that. Got to kind of line that up a little better than I did. So we'll get into this more when we do a photo restoration. Right here is the history brush. So if we click on the history brush, later on we'll get into that, but you can go back in history and restore your image. Here is the eraser, or you can press the letter E, and let me make the brush bigger. It's just like a paintbrush. So is the clone stamp. If we paint with it or clone with it, we make it bigger with the bracket keys as well. Left and right bracket. So if I erase, here we go, erasing, and you just press E to turn on the eraser. If we go here, this is the gradient tool, so we can do some cool things here. If I click on this, we go up here, you see the gradient that's there. If I click and drag, it's using this color to make a gradient. If I go up here and click on that, this is called the gradient editor, and there's lots of gradients in here. If we go over this little gear, you see we've got all of these gradients that we can use. So if I append that, I've got more gradients. I click and drag, and I'm going to do a Control-Alt-Z, Command-Option-Z on a Macintosh a few times here. The blur tool, or actually we have blur, sharpen, and smudge, and it's pretty obvious what these particular things will do. If I use my right bracket key and make that bigger, I can smooth the edges of things. If we zoom in a little bit, you can see it's softening that up. You can change the strength of that, and now it's really getting soft. Sharpen will do just the opposite, obviously. Right bracket key to make that bigger, and it'll sharpen things up. Now, because we already softened that, it's making it kind of strange looking, but it helps some. It's not a tool that I would use very often. And we have the smudge tool, which basically makes things smear, just like we're using our finger in wet paint. And we have controls for that here as well. And if we change these are blend modes. We can get strange effects out of that sometimes. Let's take the strength up. So there's lots to play with there. This is the dodge and burn and sponge tool. Dodge will lighten things up. It holds color back, so to speak. The burn tool makes things darker. And the sponge tool will saturate the colors more. So if we go over into here, we don't have a lot of colors in this image on natural stuff. Let's make this bigger, and it's on desaturate right now. If you look up here, which means it will take the color out. So if I go over his arm, it will eventually just take the color out. If I turn it on to saturate, it makes things more colorful. If you look up there, you can see it. Alright, and then the pen tool. We'll get into the pen tool later on and see what it's good for. You can get to it by pressing the letter P. Another biggie is the text tool with the letter T on it. And I'm just going to click here and say hi. And notice it's typing with the color that's down here as our foreground color. And I can change the size of the text, and even though it doesn't show any more size, I can type in anything I want. So there's a big hi. I can change the font type right over here. So there's lots of things we can do with fonts. If we go, and we have to commit, if you do something in text, you have to do what's called commit to go on and use the text and then go to the next step you want to do. Up here at the right hand side of our screen is a check. If we click that, that will commit. If we click on the move tool, that will commit. So let's just click on the one we're actually supposed to. And now you see the text is committed, and we can move it wherever we want, because guess what? It's over here on its own layer. So if I want to change that font color, I can double click right here to select that, and right here's a new color for us to use, this little color select box here, and we can change that to a brighter red. And let's commit from the move tool this time, so hot pink. Alright, so down here, use these tools here with the pen tool. We'll get into that, like I said. The hand tool is kind of cool because it allows us to move our image as well. We can click and move whatever we need to. Right here is a really unique one. Some people's the graphics card won't support this, but if yours does, it's very awesome. If you click on the rotate tool, you basically can turn your image and paint, draw whatever you want to at any angle, and then return it back to being straight up and down. If you hold the shift key, it'll pop right back where it should be. And then the zoom tool right here allows you to click and drag, zoom in and out. You can just click one at a time. If you want to zoom back out, hold down your Alt key, Option key on a Mac, and it will zoom back out. And I know it may not seem like it, but that's a pretty quick run through of most of the major tools that you'll use in Photoshop. Now, what about opening an image? Well, we did the file open, but that doesn't really, give us a lot of information or let us travel the easiest way to get to our images. So if we go up here and say Browse in Bridge, this is a part of the software that comes with Photoshop, and it's very, very cool. So let's just click on that, and it brings up this particular kind of thing. And you see, here's the image that we just worked on. And I'm going to open this one up real quick. I'm just going to, and I can go over here and look very closely in the image at details, which is pretty cool. Let's just double click this to open it up. And now we have it in Photoshop. And again, we can, zoom in, move around using this particular tool, look at the broken limbs, whatever we choose to use. And again, like I said, I think the easiest way to fill the screen with the image is simply holding down the Control key and hitting the letter or the number 0 on your keyboard, up at the top of the keyboard. And I'm just going to demo something real quick with text in this particular case. There used to be, when I was a youngster, barns all over my area where I grew up, especially when I traveled towards St. Louis and so forth. There'd be barns that had tobacco advertisings on the signs, or there'd be one I can remember, See Rock City was on the roof of the barns, and it might talk about from this particular place you travel to, you can see 4 different states at the same time. Things like that were really interesting to me, and we can recreate that through Photoshop, which is pretty neat. Let's just click on the text tool, and I'm just going to click in the image, and I'm going to type in here See Rock City. And obviously it's huge and it's the wrong size and everything. Just like a word processor, we can select text very, very easily. To select all this text right here, we can just do a Control or Command on a Mac and press the letter A, and that selects it. So we're going to go to a more normal size font, and if we move out of the text, and then we can click and move it around, it becomes like a move tool. Well, obviously this is a Broadway type of text, so that's not going to work. I'm just going to go with an old standard And let's go up here at the top, Arial. And it's a more common font. So obviously we're still too big, but instead of just keep guessing what size we want to use, we can actually click right here next to the font size where these T's are, and it's a scrubby slider. So we can make it bigger and smaller as we drag it. It's just drag your mouse over the little and big T, and then you can use the scrubby slider. Then move it up here. Now what I'm going to do is I need to transform this to make it look like it belongs on the top, and besides that we need to change that to black. So we'll click on this color picker, go down here, make it black, and we can't really transform this really well without rasterizing this image, and we're not going to get into raster and vector graphics right now, but right over here in the layers palette, if you click right on that layer that this text is on, right click on it and go to raster type. Now we can do what's a transform, and we can go to your keyboard, hold down the Control and press T, or Command T on a Mac, and then you get what's called a bounding box. To make this work really well, hold down the Control key, click at the top where you see the little box, and move this over here too. We can scooch that in a little bit and just kind of move it back and forth until it looks like it's fitting on there right, and then you can double click or hit the enter or return key on your computer. Now that's not perfect by any stretch, so I can do a Control T again, and I'm going to move it just a little bit. Still not just right. And it really helps to make these things bigger. So I'm just basically suggesting use the zoom tool. I use the keyboard shortcuts to zoom in and out. So if I hold down Control and Command on a Mac and press down the space bar with another finger, you see it turns into a plus and the magnifying glass. So that lets me, really get bigger. If I hold down the Control or Command key, Alt on a PC, and Option on a Mac, Spacebar, I zoom out. Now I know that sounds complicated, but after you use these for a while, they're going to be second nature. Now, we need to make it look like it's been there for a while. We need to kind of size it up. I just created a new text layer and I don't want that, so there we go. Click on the move tool. Now all we have to do, let's make just one of the letters a little bit bigger, and I'm going to go and fade this a little bit. Right over here is the opacity, so alter paint, we want to make it a little bit soft and see-through-y, and then I want to blur it a little bit, so we can go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and that's way too much blur. Just want a little bitty bit. Okay, that's fine. Now let's zoom out, Control minus, and we're getting closer. The other thing we want to do is really make it look like some of the paint's chipped off of it. So we go to the brush and click on it, and then go up here to where the brushes are, and if you don't see, you're not going to see all these brushes on yours. What you got to do is click on this little gear, and there's lots of brushes that you can put in. These all come in Photoshop. So when you click on something and you want to add it to your other brushes, click append. Otherwise it's just going to get rid of everything except that brush set. So click append. I'm going to cancel that because I've already got all I want. And then we just click on a brush that really looks like it's rough, like this one. Alright, now click up here so that'll go away. And now the trick is we need what's called a layer mask. Now I know this is kind of advanced stuff, but I just want you to see the what Photoshop can do. So right down here, this square donut is called a layer mask. We just put that on there, and it clicks right in here beside where our text is. This is our text right there. If we click on that, that's our mask. So now I'm just going to paint through this, and let's zoom out so we can see this better. And I'm going to undo that, Control Z, Control Alt Z a couple of times, Command Option Z on a Mac. I want to see more of this, and I want to make this really big. So I'm right bracket keying, and I'm brushing, coming in from the top. And now when we zoom out, do some more. So you can see we can really start making this look like it's faded, and it's going to look different depending on which brush you use. See, this one's a lot heavier, a lot more dense, I guess I should say. So it really socks it, but you can help that by going here, and that way it can't take out too much at a time. So we can make it look like it's up there, it's faded. And maybe one final step, we can do a Control T and just maybe make that even bigger, and hold down the Control key to scooch it wherever we want. So that kind of gives you an idea of the things that we can do in Photoshop. Let's go back to the bridge, and let's go back and get our car again. Now let me just tell you that we actually still had the car over here, but I wanted the car without any of the junk on it. But you can always go up here in this bar and see the different images. If you don't want them stuck in the bar, you can go up here and go to Arrange and say I want them tiled. This way you can actually see what's on each image, and you can, you know, just change it to whatever you want. 3 up. So let's see, we did that already. Let's get back up here and tile all. I don't want tile all. Let's see, range horizontally. I wanted to show you that one. And then consolidate all tabs. So what if we wanted to see this image? Well, we can just click and drag it down and have both images open at the same time. Okay, we can drop it back up in there in the title bar if we need to. Let me just mention, if you're used to your tools being in a double column instead of going all the way down, if you go up to this little double arrow right up here at the top of your tool palette, you can put them like they were in older versions of CS. I like it this way. It gives me more real estate to work on in the image. Well, let's just say that we want to make this hubcap shine a little bit more. We can brighten the whole image up by, you know, just using levels. So if we go to Image, Adjustments, Levels, we can, you know, make the image brighter. Our wheel's certainly shiny, but look, everything else has gotten so bright it's kind of ridiculous. If we take that back to the center and move this one left, this is shining nicely now too, but everything else is as well. So let's cancel that. We only want to make this shiny. So the way to do that is use our elliptical marquee. Obviously a square selection of a round wheel won't work well. I'm going to select that, and I'm going to make my wheel really big. I'm going to hold down my control key, command key on a Mac, spacebar, click and drag. Make that nice and big, and I'm holding down my spacebar, which gives me a shortcut to the hand tool, which is really nice. Alright, I've got my elliptical marquee tool. I can click and drag to make a selection. Now, I can't get it quite where I need it to go. Well, if you can click and drag and then hold down with the space bar, you can move that selection back, drag it some more, move it over a little bit to the left, drag it some more, letting go of the space bar, drag it down just a little bit, because you want these selections to be as perfect as you can get them, and then let go with your left mouse. Now I can make all the changes I want to this wheel, and it will not affect anything else in the image. So if I go back up to Image, Adjustments, and Levels, and drag this slider, see how that is brightening up, and the rest of the image is not changing at all. And let's just say we want it right about there. Click OK. Let's look at the other wheel. Make it do a Control minus or Command minus on a Mac, and I'm going to do a Control D as in dog to turn off the marching ants, and they're both looking pretty good. Let's go to history, and that's before and that's after. Let's go to here. That's the way it looked before and after. So don't go crazy. Subtle changes can make big changes, but I think you see that that made a nice one. I'm going to do a Control spacebar, click and drag, Command spacebar, click and drag on a Mac, and this time I'm going to use the elliptical marquee tool and drag from right in the center. Now that didn't work too good, so let's do something a little bit different. Put it right in the center again, hold down the Shift key and the Alt key or Option key on a Mac, and click and drag. Everything went bonkers on me because I'm trying to record this in a small screen and not working well for me. Let's try that again. So click right in the middle, Shift, Alt or Option, and we drag it out there. It's wanting to go crazy on me again. And let's go down. I got close that time, but no cigar. It's just going off the screen on me. Let me try it one more time. It's hard to get it in the center when it's not blown up more than that. Shift, Alt, or Option. And that's not perfect, but it's close. Now I can click inside that and drag it up a little bit and get it just right. Again, I can bring up Image, Adjustments, Levels, and let's try this one this time. That's really bright. How about we bring the contrast down and then bring that up, and let's see what that looks like. So Control minus or Command minus on a Mac, and I think Control D to turn that off. I think that made that wheel look even better. So let's go, and I got it so full of failed attempts to make the circle. Now you see it before, and that's afterwards. So that looks pretty nice. Now you see the power of using the marquee and elliptical Marquee and changing levels, making those good selections. But we can also do that with another tool. Let me get the marching ants up there. There's another very powerful tool that we can use. Go up to Image, Adjustments, and Curves. And a lot of times I'll use these shortcuts. Control M brings up the curves. And here we can change the light to, let's make sure we're on the right place here. Control, let's do that again. Mode, Adjustments, and Curves. See, that really went drastic. Just making it gray. This will make it darker. And then you can also bend. Let's move that back a little bit that way. And click OK. And let's see if I went too far this time. I believe I have. But it still doesn't look horrible. But I think if we go back in here, that looks a little bit better. But I wanted you to see curves as well as levels. Quickly back to our barn. You'd think I would stay on one image, right? But I like going back and forth. If we want to paint on this barn, let's get the layers up here. Got to be on the right layer. I'm just going to turn that off and be on the background layer. Actually, let's just throw that away. We don't need that anymore. I'm going to turn on the brush tool, or you can press the letter B on your keyboard. B as in boy. And let's get a normal brush. Let's get a nice soft brush, much smaller. You can move your mouse outside of this box so you can see what the size of it is. Make it bigger, make it really big. Now, the hardness of the brush, if it's all the way to the left, that means there is no hardness. You see it's 0%. If I go over here, it's all the way hard. So the brush edges are very hard. Soft on the left. Okay? Now, let's say we want to paint on this barn with a different color. Well, easy to do. We go up to Window, down to Color, click it. Right here we have swatches, or we have the color sliders, so we can get all kinds of color right off here. But I like swatches, and we can make new swatches if we want to, but you can select any color you want, and if you click on it, notice over here the color changes in our foreground background colors. So as we click these different colors, that's what this is going to be. So if we start painting on the barn, it's going to be with whatever color we sample. Now you say that's just covering the boards over, which you'd be right. So it's always a bad idea to paint on the original layer. So I'm going to undo that, and here's how I'm going to do it, because if I look in my history, I've already gone too far. I can't go back far enough to get rid of all of the paint. Just by one, I can't get back. So here's what I can do. I can go to File, Revert. That means it's going to go back to the original image exactly the way it was. So there it is. So we're good to go again. Now, if I create a new layer with nothing in it, I go down here to the bottom of the layers palette is like a little piece of paper with the edge curled up. You click that one time. Now with the paintbrush on, we select a paint. Let's make the brush bigger. So I'm going to use my right bracket key and I'm going to paint. And you see it's just covering up. And I'm only painting at 49%. Let's paint it 100%. So now it's really covering up. Let's paint with some of this, and let's paint with some of this. Now here's how to get the boards to actually show through the paint. We go over here. These are called the blend modes, and all of these work differently. Now to make this work right, I need to bring this up so you can see it. The blend modes, it defaults to saying normal, but if you click that and you go down to where it says color, you see our color now has blended with the barn color. And we can go back over to this layer, actually this layer right here, and we'll paint now. Let's bring our colors. Let's move this back down here. Actually, we'll move it back over to the beginning. Let's get our colors back where we can see them, and let's get something a little brighter, hot pink in there, so you can see how those things interact. The blend modes act differently depending on which one of those you choose. Some of them work very favorably, some of them don't work well at all, as you can see. But we'll find as we work this semester different uses for the blend modes that are very powerful. Now, I mentioned earlier that we didn't have all that many states in history that we can go back in, a default number. Well, there's lots of things that we can change in Photoshop, and I'm going to make some recommendations to you on how to set your Photoshop up for best use in this course. So we go to Edit, Preferences. If you're on a Macintosh, I believe that's going to be under your Apple, and go to Preferences. So Preferences, and click it, and when you get there, just click General, because we're going to go through several of these pages. So all of this up here is fine. Sometimes people like a beep when done. I don't like that at all, so I don't put that on there. There's different things you can click. It doesn't hurt to click all these on if you want to. Interface. You see several things here. I go with the default. Here's where I was talking about. Some people like this out here to be black. As you can see how different that looks. This is more the old style, and this is kind of what I prefer, but that's totally up to you, however you want it to be. File handling. These are what I use, so you may want to pause the video and set yours up the same way, and that includes for Camera Raw, and we'll get into Camera Raw later. Don't worry about that now. Performance. This is key. If you only have one drive on your computer, it's probably going to say C, and you'll want that checked. But I have an external drive that has a lot more room. You see, I've only got 7 gig left on the default drive, so that's not enough to work Photoshop. You need a fast drive and a big drive with lots of space on it. So click that, whichever one it is for you. Make sure your Photoshop isn't using more than 69 to 70%. Otherwise, you're going to run out of room on your operating system. I have a lot of RAM in my system, so I've got it up to 71, but I have 16 gigs of RAM, so my operating system is going to be fine. Over here, here's the biggie. If you want more than 20 history states, those undos over here in the history palette, just click that and put in however many you want, but don't go overboard, because all of these are snapshots of your image, and that's what allows you to keep going back to those different states, and that's what they're called, history states. And your files will become huge as you have more history states. So limit yourself. If default's to 20, I like to use around 40. Alright. All of this other, if you've got a graphics processor that this will allow you to check, be sure and click it. Cursors, really a big one. Unless you have these two things clicked, you're not going to see your cursors, the best view of your cursors to paint and select and sample and so forth. So make sure the second from the last one there is checked and precise. Everything here is fine, so don't change anything from the defaults here either, or guides and grids, unless you find later that something else works better. Don't change anything here. Make sure all three of those are checked. 3D, you may get into that later. I use defaults there. Click OK. Now none of that will take effect until you close Photoshop and open it back up. Then your new settings will be taking place. Another thing you can do for yourself, again for Apple people, this isn't located in the same place, but if you go to Edit, there's also keyboard shortcuts down there at the bottom, and you can go in there and change the keyboard shortcuts for anything that's in Photoshop. So this is a good way to learn what the keyboard shortcuts are, but it's also the way to go in and change them if you don't like what they are. And it'll warn you that that's already assigned if it is, but if that's what you want to do, it's up to you. It's your Photoshop, so you can do with it whatever you want. You can also change how the menus are set up and so forth. Another way to learn your keyboard shortcuts is basically look up here on the different things, and the major things that you'll use always have the keyboard shortcuts listed. Well, that wraps up our introductory video for assignment 1, chapter 1. Hopefully you'll go through all of it. Be patient with me as I try to describe it. Pause as often as you need to so you can take it all in. Talk to you all soon.